All right, hi everyone. This is our Brexit final project. I'm Zayd, and my group members are Alina, Ashton, Madison, and Jennie. So first, what we're going to talk about is what does Brexit mean and what exactly it is. So Brexit stands for Britain and Exit. That's where they got the name Brexit. And on June 23rd of 2016, a vote for Brexit was held, um, and 52% of the people who voted uh, voted to leave Brexit, while or voted to leave the European Union, while 48% voted to stay. And basically, like I said, this vote is a vote to leave the European Union, hence why it's called Brexit. So since then, the deadline to leave the European Union has been continuously extended, and Britain has still not left the European Union, and that's pretty much just because they fear the consequences of actually leaving the European Union. So what is the European Union? So the EU was founded, it was formed after World War II, and it consists of 28 different countries in Europe. It makes trading easier and allows citizens to go from country to country for working purposes without facing border difficulties. And it created trade and defense treaties between countries.
The rise of populism and nationalism in Western, a majority vote for Brexit shows unfavorable to the Europe and focus more on nationalistic economic approach. Um, eco- Economic problems keep growing in Europe since 2008. Accident Zero will save Britain money, which will allow them to reinvest the money in their country rather than outside of the country. Britain, um, corruption and political alike, not as much of a need for certain organizations created after World War II. The idea that there are not many benefits today as there were after World War II.
Recently, there have been many political uncertainties in European economies. One example of this would be the recent collapse in Greece's economy. My picture below shows Greece's economy just barely being held up, trying to be held up by the European Union, and this leads to countries being unsure of whether they want to be a part of the European Union because they're going to have to help and support other countries. And another uncertainty is that there has been an extreme surge in refugees that the area has not seen since World War II, and this causes a lot of strain on the areas because of recent conflicts. People do not necessarily want these other people coming into their country, and because of these uncertainties, people are looking to become more independent and more nationalist. The growing nationalism. There have been political victories in European countries such as Germany, Italy, Austria, Hungary, and Poland. Now, this is important because seats in the EU Parliament are based on population. So Germany is the biggest population of all the EU countries. So they have the most voting seats in the EU Parliament. There's also Angela Merkel, who used to be the German Chancellor. She is more center right and less far right, like the nationalist. She is not going to run for re-election in the EU Parliament because she lost her state election. And she used to have many backers, and this is seen as a loss for the European Union. All of her old supporters are either moving towards the Green Party or moving towards the far-right Nationalist Party. Now, there are other leaders who are still trying to continue and fight for the EU to exist. On the top right here is President Macron. He's the French president, and he gave a really good quote here that I thought sums up the whole situation very well. It says, "The world is fracturing, new disorders are appearing, and Europe is tipping almost everywhere towards extremes and again is giving way to nationalism. Those who do not see what's going on around us are sleepwalking. Now, there has been hope for the European Union due to recent political victories from French President Macron and the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte.
Brexit is a hot topic for individuals living in Ireland. There is a border between Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom, and the Republic of Ireland, which is part of the European Union. If the British exit the European Union without a deal, the Irish border will be the only land border between these two countries. This ultimately means that there will be a hard Irish border, making everything more strictly regulated. Ireland has a negative experience with a hard border. Starting from 1968 to 1998, more than 3,500 people were killed when the Irish border was in place. Ireland signed the Good Friday Agreement in 1998, which stopped decades of violence and conflict between the two countries. Checks on borders were also removed. If Brexit occurs, the European Union will be trying to prevent products from UK entering their market that would be either because of unfair competition or because they were deemed as unsafe. However, the United Kingdom has promised not to introduce any new checks, controls, or traffic on goods coming from Ireland into Northern Ireland. One thing for certain is that both countries, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, do not want history to repeat itself and have a hard border if the Brexit ends up being a no-deal decision. There are many risks that are associated with a no-deal Brexit that would pose a global threat to businesses and the British economy. However, the lives of people living in Britain will be affected tremendously as well. Many individuals enjoy traveling and immigrating to different parts of the world, but with a no deal, that will become challenging. British citizens will have multiple privileges taken away when traveling to Europe and be forced to take extra measures to prepare for their trips, taking into consideration a lot of things such as their passports, visa, their European health coverage, and etc. If a no-deal Brexit occurs, moving across borders might become more difficult. In 2018, 53.7 million UK residents chose to travel to Europe. Thus, EU citizens in the UK are advised to apply for settled status, while UK individuals in the EU are advised to register as residents of the country they live in. Traveling between borders for individuals will become more challenging, but for those who travel with their animals, it will become a nightmare as a result of all the rules and costs it will require. If a no-deal decision is reached, animals will have to go through multiple mandatory documentation of vet tests, which will take multiple months to compile before traveling. British citizens will also have difficulties with getting health care abroad in Europe as before because their European Health Insurance Card, EHIC, will be invalid.
Risk number 1, supply chain. Europe accounts for 54% of goods imported into United Kingdom. United Kingdom accounts for 49% of exports to the Europe. A sudden pause in supply chain will cause the stock state of water, medicine, and food supply. Both of the Europe and Britain would take a hit from this stress, while even for Brexit officials are trying to make a deal with Europe to prevent a no-deal Brexit. Current deadline is January 31st.
Risk number 2 is uncertainty for business, and this affects the people of Britain, the business owners, and the economy as a whole. The lack of preparedness is evident as more than 2/5 of British companies have not yet conducted a risk assessment. Even the firms that have conducted these assessments admit that they're financially ill-prepared for the implications of a chaotic exit. Ultimately, there's just a very big question mark over the economic future of Britain. It's completely unknown, and with the continuous pushback of the date, it's very difficult to know what is going to happen or if it will happen at all. Jobs would be affected. Consumer habits and prices of goods would all drastically change in response to the disruption of the supply chain. Ultimately, this really leads to just an overwhelming difficulty for business owners in regards to making long-term operational decisions. They have absolutely no insight into the future and the trade agreements that will be made and the level of protection at the borders and just general economic health that helps them make the decisions that are important for their businesses. Risk number 3 is reputation. Now, this is very important because it's the public perception of Britain as a whole. Recently, there was an article published where 8 representatives from leading business organizations were in the UK that the reputation damage with trading partners would definitely happen if there was a no-deal exit out of the EU. The disconnection from the support system is going to be extremely detrimental to the UK's negotiating power. And this is because they were able to previously act as a larger entity because of their backing by these smaller countries. And without this support system, it's going to be very difficult to demand the respect that they previously had. The uncertainty surrounding the trade conditions really ultimately dissuades the future investments that are crucial to the economic health for business owners. With over half of imports relying on the EU, they need to compensate these losses in some way, and that is by making new trade agreements and new partners. With this poor public perception, it's going to be yet another hurdle for these business owners to conquer in order to be doing well business-wise. It was even said in a quote that it is not necessarily guaranteed that they can even make up for these losses. So the importance of reputation and having a better perception from their trading partners is really important and a large risk that is posed.
Conclusion, Brexit will significantly impact on the food and drug supply in the United Kingdom. The food and drug supply firms and industries are facing permanent uncertainties. Firms are anticipating massive economic adverse effects on their operation and income. The supply of food and drugs are likely to decline actually in the region. Brexit is likely to reduce supply of food and drugs in United Kingdom and in turn reduce availability and choice of foods and drugs and increase price of foods and drugs, making less fortunate groups more vulnerable. And here, the last 3 slides are all the works cited that we use on the paper. Thank you. Thank you for listening.